In Mexico, President Claudia Sheinbaum denying Trump's statements that she had agreed to close the borders to stop migration. In Lebanon, the army denounced that Israel violates the ceasefire for the first time after several attacks in the southern region of the country. Venezuelan Executive Vice President Delcy Rodríguez opens on Thursday the 17th edition of the nation's International Tourism First FITVEN 2024 with the participation of more than 40 countries. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll be with the news. Stay with us. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum rejected U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's assertions about Mexico's supposed stance to stop migration by closing the U.S.-Mexico border. The Mexican president clarified that she does not intend to close the migratory passage with the United States, but to build bridges between governments to help each other. The head of state explained that during a phone call conversation with U.S. President-elect, strategies were discussed to address the migration phenomenon through collaboration on security issues. She also remarked that the measure is part of a campaign to protect sovereignty and prevent the entry of fentanyl into the country.
Everyone has their own way of communicating, but I can assure you, I give you the certainty that we would never, besides we would be unable, they proposed us to close the border in the north of our country and in the south of the United States. It has never been our proposal. And of course, we do not agree with that. So President Trump has his own way of communicating, but we talked about this strategy on the phone call. And I told him that this caravan of migrants that you are referring to in your publication is not going to reach the northern border because Mexico has a strategy. So that was how the conversation went.
In addition, the Mexican president stressed her phone conversation focused on the migration strategy her government has been working on and highlighted. She also brought up to Trump during the call the need to end U.S. blockade against Cuba and Venezuela.
Firstly, I am going to answer the question you asked me on our phone call. What I presented to President Trump was the migration strategy. We have been pursuing it for months, and we have strengthened it since January 2024 due to the migration wave, particularly in the last months of 2023. In all, we are strengthening this comprehensive strategy, which comprises several actions. In addition to other proposals made, such as putting an end to the blockades against Cuba and Venezuela, because these cohesive policies cause suffering to the peoples, forcing these peoples to find migration as their way out. It is a comprehensive program that proposes the collaboration among the different countries, and in some way people depart from or they are able to reach our country. Granted, in their goal is to reach the northern border.
In Bolivia, the Minister of Government Eduardo del Castillo announced that former anti-drug chief Maximiliano Dávila will be extradited to the United States after authorization from the Bolivian Supreme Court of Justice. Dávila was apprehended in 2022 while he was trying to cross over to Argentina. The judicial system charged him with transactions in controlled substances and handling arms related to drug trafficking. In this sense, the President of the Supreme Court of Justice, Marco Jaimes, explained that before his extradition authorities should comply with a series of legal requirements and formalities. Let's take a very short break, but remember you can join us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, where you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. In Lebanon, the army denounced that Israel violated the ceasefire for the first time after several attacks in the southern region of the country. The Lebanese army stated that Israeli tanks opened fire on Thursday in southern Lebanon on the second day of the ceasefire reached with Hezbollah, and also stressed that displaced peoples returning to their homes were also hit. It was also reported that Israeli forces opened fire on vehicles in the border town of Markaba. For its part, the Israeli army issued a warning for the residents of the Berlin villages in southern Lebanon and distributed a map with a mark prohibit sun for the inhabitants of Sheba and Al Hebriyad. Following the ceasefire agreed between Israel and Hezbollah and Lebanon, Israel's attacks in the Gaza Strip had intensified, specifically in the Nusra refugee camp, mainly targeting the health sectors. From Gaza, our correspondent Huda Hegazi has more details.
After the ceasefire agreed between the Israeli regime and the Hezbollah movement in Lebanon, the attacks of the Israeli regime in the Gaza Strip have intensified, especially in the last 2 days. Today, the Israeli regime has focused all its attacks specifically on the Nuseirat refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip, specifically in the northern part of the refugee camp.
Decir que desde el comienzo de esta madrugada el régimen de Israel bombardeó de manera aérea y de manera terrestre los edificios más altos de ese campo de refugiados y aproximadamente 5 edificios.
Since the beginning of this morning, the Israeli regime bombed from the air and from the ground the tallest buildings in that refugee camp, and approximately 5 buildings have been destroyed, especially the highest floors, as an attempt by the Israeli army to destroy every tall structure that is in that camp. Because in the case that the army wants to incursion into the interior of that refugee camp is easier for it since it has greater visibility without tall buildings that prevent it from operating or entering in that camp.
También decir que no solamente los edificios elevados han sido bombardeados, sino que también viviendas civiles, aglomeraciones de personas y acorde a la última actualización que ha sido emitida.
Since the beginning of this morning, the Israeli regime bombed from the air and from the ground the tallest buildings in that refugee camp, and approximately 5 buildings have been destroyed, especially the highest floors, as an attempt by the Israeli army to destroy every tall structure that is in that camp. Because in the case that the army wants to incursion into the interior of that refugee camp is easier for it since it has greater visibility without tall buildings that prevent it from operating or entering in that camp. It has been reported that ambulance cars have been directly attacked and one of the cars has been completely destroyed, and the paramedic who was in that ambulance car has been injured, in addition to 2 journalists who were inside it and who were going to report the events at the site of the incident, and one of them is the correspondent of the Al Jazeera channel. So the attack has even been targeted directly at the medical personnel as well as at the journalists to prevent them from showing the atrocities of the occupation regime. Moreover, other ambulance cars have been partially damaged by the shrapnel that has fallen from the missiles and artillery shells, and at this moment the biggest fear is the possibility of a land incursion, since at this moment it has been reported that the military mechanisms and tanks of the occupation army are being relocated in the north of that camp, and at any moment they could incursion into that place. Finally, the latest communiqué issued by the Palestinian Ministry of Health here in the Gaza Strip was a message addressed especially to the international community and the World Health Organization, in which the situation of the hospitals in the Gaza Strip was reported. The ministry has assured that approximately 75% of the hospitals and medical centers have collapsed and are of service.
el 75% de los hospitales y centros médicos han colapsado y han salido fuera de servicio. Solamente quedan 5 hospitales activos en la franja
Only
de Gaza.
5 hospitals remain active in the Gaza Strip, an insufficient number for the amount of casualties and wounded that occur on a daily basis due to the occupation army's shelling. It has also condemned the closure of the borders, the prevention of the entry of medical supplies and goods as well as fuel, which is something that is directly affecting the health sector, and therefore the ministry has directly condemned the indiscriminate attacks of the occupation army, especially on the health sector here in the Gaza Strip.
The Commission for Prisoners and Ex-Prisoners Affairs denounced the mistreatment of Palestinian women in Israeli prisons. The organizations warn about increasing abuses against Palestinian prisoners since October 2023, which worsened over time. In this regard, it points out that Israeli prisons authorities are denying the detainees blankets and winter clothing despite the drop in temperatures, as well as preventing the entry of hygiene and personal care items. The organizations alerted that since the beginning of the Israeli aggressions, the army and the Tel Aviv police have arrested 435 women in the occupied West Bank, including from the East Jerusalem area. Let's take our last break, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, where you'll be able to watch on interviews, sub-stories, special broadcasts, and more. Hit the subscribe button and active the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. We'll find out your breakdown. Go away. Welcome back. Venezuelan Executive Vice President Delcy Rodríguez opened on Thursday the 17th edition of the nation's international truce fair, FITVEN 2024, with the participation of more than 40 countries. On behalf of President Nicolás Maduro, Rodríguez welcomed the participating countries and international delegations, as well as the national entrepreneurs. She reminded that tourism is a vital engine to boost not only the country's development, but that of the peoples of the region. The Vice President also took the opportunity to reject the new coercive measures adopted by the U.S. government against Caracas and denounce Washington's intentions to hurt the Venezuelan officials who are working for the well-being of their homeland. Also in Venezuela, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples offered America's People's Trade Treaty of TCP met with a team of anti-fascist promoters in the framework of the International Anti-Fascist for a New World. During the meeting, the executive secretary of the bloc, Jorge Arriaza, recalled the alliance between Cuba and Venezuela during the organization's inception. In this sense, Arriaza stated that the objective of President Hugo Chavez was to create a Bolivarian alternative with the alliance of the peoples of America. In Venezuela, the Vice President and Minister of Oil, Delcy Rodríguez, condemned the actions of the extreme right of the country against this sector in order to gain political power through destabilizing actions.
And I would never want, at this time of permanent attacks on our industry which, as I have said, it has been the main target of the criminal blockade against Venezuela. I have never wanted to miss the opportunity to highlight the knowledge and expertise of our workers in this industry. Very recently, after a criminal attack against the gas distribution center of the country, the recovery has been possible thanks to 800 workers of PDVSA, who from different places in the country parts of the country gathered to recover the gas service for the Venezuelan people.
On Wednesday, the Minister of Internal Justice and Peace of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, confirmed that the former candidate of the opposition coalition, Edmundo González, will not return to the country in January. The also first vice president of the United Socialist Party of the nation gave an account of a campaign initiated by the violent far-right opposition. This way, Cabello reports the opposition is trying to frighten the Venezuelan people by various means. insinuating more than a visit by Gonzalez, a situation of chaos and violence in the country until January the 10th. Recently, members of the extremist opposition disrespected conditions of exile and even challenging their militants have made calls to take the streets to set the stage for a supposed takeover. Moving on, landslides in eastern Uganda have left at least 15 people dead and more than 100 other missing. The landslides were triggered by heavy rains in the mountainous districts of Bulyanhulu, 280 kilometers east of the nation's capital, Kampala, on Wednesday night. The Uganda Red Cross Society said the rescue effort was continuing, but the death toll was likely to rise. Local officials told journalists in the area that an excavator will be brought to assist in the rescue efforts, but the roads were covered in mud and rain was still failing. The newspapers, the Daily Monitor, reported that most of the bodies recovered so far were those of children. In Brazil, heavy rains that hit the capital of the state of Bahia have caused more than 300 incidents, leaving one person dead and injuring 3 others. According to the Ministry of the country's National Institute of Meteorology, November has been the rainiest month since 1971 of the region. The downpours have also caused the electric service to be disconnected after the fall of high-tension cables. While in Salvador de Bahia, a structure collapsed on a main venue, prompting debris removal efforts to be activated afterwards as the search for a missing person continues. In this context, authorities report that public transportation covering the area had to be diverted and businesses were unable to open the doors. Changing topics and going to culture. Peru's Ministry of Foreign Affairs had over 47 archaeological cultural objects to the country's Ministry of Culture on Thursday after they were recovered from a number of countries across the globe. According to the press release from Peru's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 29 items were returned voluntarily, identified at acquisition and returned through diplomatic channels, and 13 were seized by the Italian Comando Carabinieri Tutela Patrimonio Culturale and returned through the courts. The collections include pieces from the Mishu, Nazca, and Chuquibamba cultures. The objects were recovered from various countries such as Argentina, the US, Italy, and the Netherlands, among others. The Ministry of Culture, though, will now decide where the pieces will be housed.
This, of course, is a source of pride that today we're able to hand over to the Ministry of Culture 47 cultural assets that have been returned to their homeland. This act reaffirms our strong and sustained commitment to the protection of the cultural heritage of the nation. This kind of international cooperation inspires us to redouble our efforts and explore new forms of collaboration to face the global challenge of illicit trafficking in cultural property.
The legendary Gothic Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris will be open its doors on December the 7th, 5.5 years after the devastating fire in 2019. The world will get a first look inside the renovated Gothic jewel on Friday when French President Emmanuel Macron, accompanied by his wife Brigitte and Archbishop of Paris, Laurent Ulrich, begins a program of ceremonies that will culminate with an official entry into the cathedral on December the 7th. The first Catholic Mass is scheduled to be held the following days. The cathedral roof was severely damaged and it's totally destroyed by a devastating fire on the eve of April 15, 2019. Among the theories for the cause of the blast are a cigarette left by a workman or an electric fail. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials from Facebook, on X, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English, I'm from the south of Marrero. Thank you for watching.